out the common market's shaky finances. It's decided to pay only 60% of the advances demanded by EEC members to subsidise farmers this month. The Commission has found it increasingly difficult to keep within spending limits, and only last month the European Parliament had to authorise extra cash to supplement the budget. Long-life milk from France will soon be on sale in British supermarkets, unless there's a major revolt tonight in Parliament. The Commons are debating new common market rules ending Britain's ban on continental ultra-heat-treated milk. Labour MPs want the changes delayed. They're backing the milkman, who went to Westminster today with the message that doorstep deliveries and thousands of jobs could be at risk. The European Parliament in Strasbourg has backed the immediate deployment of American cruise and Pershing missiles. Left-wing MPs wanted a 6-month delay, but they were easily outvoted. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed that a man climbed over the wire fence at the Greenham Common Air Base late last night, but a ministry spokesman said the intruder was immediately arrested and handed over to local police. And there were more arrests at the base today as anti-nuclear protesters continue to demonstrate against the arrival of cruise missiles. Police moved in when the peace women tried to blockade the main gate. More than 20 women were eventually arrested and taken away in police vans. So far this month, police have made nearly 450 arrests at Greenham Common. The Soviet Union is reported to have developed its own version of the cruise missile. The British magazine Jane's Defence Review says the design was probably pirated from the West. It's the first time Moscow has developed a cruise missile that can hit targets on land. The Queen's tour of Bangladesh has brought her face-to-face with some of the world's poorest people. She met children who'd have starved to death if they hadn't been saved by a special hospital paid for by British aid. Kate Adie reports.
No country likes its poverty and malnutrition paraded. However, in Bangladesh, the second poorest country in the world, it's unavoidable. So the Queen came to the Save the Children Child Nutrition Unit in Dhaka to see how British aid is spent. Save the Children and the British government pay for this vital unit. The babies brought here are usually near death. Their mothers are too poor to feed them or too ignorant about nutrition. Here they get 5 meals a day. An 18-month boy was shown to the Queen, skin and bone, like all the babies here, less than half his proper weight. Despite the British aid, the unit has to turn away many babies like this for lack of space, facilities and money. Waiting to take the Queen up country, a flower-decked train for a journey past thousands of chanting people. Past the jungle where man-eating Bengal tigers used to prowl, to a tiny village where the fish leapt and danced as a remarkably lucky group of fishermen just happened upon a splendid catch, silver and gold, to set a fat fish before the Queen. Musically, the day was difficult. With the conductor completely overawed by the Queen's approach. In her air-conditioned car, perhaps the Queen didn't hear, as the conductor outperformed his band. Sweeter music greeted the Duke in the tea plantations of Sylhet. British government aid here is intended to improve the conditions of the tea workers, whose job appears picturesque, but is in reality a hard grind. Few people here could afford the price of a British cup of tea.
But a large part of our tea also goes to London directly, to consignment.
England's footballers are out of the European Championship. Although they won 4-0 tonight in Luxembourg, Denmark beat Greece, and so they top England's qualifying group and go through to the finals next year. On top of that, England's day was once again marred because of hooliganism by their supporters. The worst of the trouble came late last night. By midnight, more than 20 people had been arrested for drunkenness, fighting and stealing. Those arrested included local as well as visiting English fans. Many of the English spent the night on the streets because local hotels refused to take them in. England's fate was sealed even before the kick-off because Denmark had already beaten Greece in Athens. Preben Elkjær scored a fine individual goal for Denmark after a quarter of an hour. And just after half-time, Alan Simonson, who played with Charlton Athletic last season, made victory certain. The England team had listened to a radio commentary of the Greece-Denmark match. The result came just half an hour before their kick-off. Manager Bobby Robson summed up the pre-match mood in the dressing room as gloomy. Michael Blakey reports from Luxembourg on events inside and outside the ground.
There was fighting on the streets of Luxembourg well before the game began, with supporters clashing with police and soldiers. Some fans complained of undue violence by the police, who were certainly determined to stamp out trouble after the experience of 6 years ago. At the stadium, it was hard to believe that this was a soccer match. Hundreds of soldiers arrived to back up the police, and at one stage they seemed to outnumber the fans. Many of the supporters were escorted to the ground, and some of them have been here for 3 days without being able to find a bed. The England team arrived to the news that Denmark were beating Greece by 2-0, which meant tonight's match had no significance. Bobby Robson looked and sounded despondent as he faced the fact that England were out of the tournament. But if he was despondent, the fans didn't show any disappointment. It was an amazing scene. They were behind coils of barbed wire and totally surrounded by soldiers. It was a bitterly cold night, and one fan must have risked exposure as the troops stripped him. As for the game, well, a corner from Glenn Hoddle led to the first goal by Brian Robson after 10 minutes. And the second came as Mariner forced his way through in the 40th minute. 2-0 at half-time against a team which hasn't won for 10 years.
England's victory still leaves them 1 point behind Denmark, and both have played all their matches. England are certain to finish in second place. After today's matches, only Wales look likely to go through to the finals next summer. Although they lost to Bulgaria, they'll go through if they beat Yugoslavia in Wales in their last match. Northern Ireland completed a double by beating West Germany in Hamburg. Their goal followed a fine run by Stewart. He deserved to score himself, but it was 18-year-old Norman Whiteside who shot the loose ball home. But West Germany will still go through if they beat Albania on Sunday. Scotland were beaten by East Germany in Halle and finish bottom of their group. There was a rather special wedding in Salford today. Britain's oldest bride got married at the tender age of 99. Jane Murphy's bridegroom, George Brearley, is a mere youngster, 89. The wedding guests included residents from the Old People's Home where the couple met just 8 weeks ago. Also on hand with the confetti were many of the 50 grandchildren and great-grandchildren Jane and George had between them. But the subject of children still concerned the newlyweds.
I said, I can't have babies. And he says, buy one.
And the main points again. The PLO leader Yasser Arafat and his men are close to final defeat in Lebanon. Dr. Robert Jones has been released by police investigating the murder of his wife. British Aerospace has won its biggest civil aircraft order for 20 years. And some news just in: about 20 people were arrested in London tonight when anti-nuclear demonstrators tried to block off part of Trafalgar Square. And finally, Princess Alexandra pressed a button in London tonight, and now we know Christmas is coming. The lights are on in Regent Street. And just in case you didn't know, there are 33 shopping days to go. From me, good night.
On Breakfast Time tomorrow, a special Christmas for the Bernardo kids in Belfast. Breakfast Time's toy appeal gets a massive response. And win a sleigh ride to Santa's Cave in our children's Christmas competition. There's Kenneth Williams with a personal insight into helping elderly parents. The new French long life milk is at the housewife's choice. And Donovan wakes us up with a mellow morning tune. All that from 6:30.
Good evening to you. The weather seems to have got itself stuck in something of a rut, and indeed this area of high pressure looks as if it'll be with us for at least another couple of days, keeping most parts of the country dry, although fairly cloudy. We can see how cloudy it is on the satellite picture, because as you can instantly see, much of the country covered in a blanket of cloud. But by using that expression blanket, it's quite a serious one, because at least in a way it will help to save much of the country from a touch of frost, although perhaps in these more northern areas 1 or 2 breaks might just be sufficient. And the only real unsettled weather of note is miles away, actually, way down over Spain. But as far as this country is concerned, as I said, a fine, dry night for most parts. A little bit of drizzle around in this southeastern corner, and some as well in northern and western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And as we saw on the satellite picture, just the chance of some breaks sufficient in the border counties there of a touch of frost and perhaps a patch or two of fog. And then for tomorrow, well, in a way, rather like today. In other words, much of the country probably staying cloudy, although reasonably dry. I think if you're lucky, you'll get a little bit of brightness, perhaps even a shaft or two of sunlight, especially in the more sheltered spots like, say, South Wales and along the south coast there. But then, on the other hand, in southeastern parts of England, the cloud will be thick enough to give a little rain or drizzle from time to time, as it will in northern and western parts of Scotland and in Northern Ireland. That's all. A very good evening to you.
Programmes for Thursday evening on BBC One. At 7:30, Madness, The Assembly, Aztec Camera and the Rolling Stones are among the groups appearing on Top of the Pops. Wildlife on One is at 8:05.
Extraterrestrials are as curious about us as we are about them.
Del and Wadney's working relationship is suffering in Only Fools and Horses at 8:30.
Why didn't you warn me that copper was coming?
Because I didn't see him.
You didn't see him? What do you want me to get you, radar or something?
In Johnny Jarvis at 9:25, Lipton and Jarvis both have problems with their fathers.
Listen, I know that job backwards now. I learned it in 2.5 days. Should never have jumped in so quick. Should have got some qualifications. Should have got a proper apprenticeship.
All right, get one then.
I will.
With Question Time at 10:15 and Barbara Mandrell at 11:15, that's Thursday evening on BBC One.